So this is Baruch Fleischman, and now you have an idea. If you've been listening to the last two shiurim, and this is the third one, I'm not going to do any more today. But because we're so close to Yom Kippur, it's really important to understand the river that's flowing beneath it. Everybody concentrates on trying to do the best they can to understand the words of the prayers. There's a lot to be gained from that. There's no question about that. But a higher level would be able to see what's actually transpiring in the spiritual worlds. And so this what we have over here in the Tiva Kavanas is bringing the words of the Rav here. And he said, "V'nachzo the Inyan the Rishon." So let's come over to the really beginning thing we talked about. He says, "Ki ayedecha chamesh tefilos she'anim mispalim b'Yom Kippurim." So we have 5 different tefilos that we say on Yom Kippurim. Anamam shicha malachu, we bring to her. We bring her all of these things, the 5 different kinds of forms of pleasure. Panemium, it's called panemium. And they come from where? Now, the last time I told you a secret that I learned, and it's not really obvious over here. And that, once again, is that the worlds move up in tandem. So we can't say that Malchus or Anpin, and she left him in the dust. What actually happens is that they move up in tandem, but only the panemius of them moved up. So he says, the Rav says like this: every olam, everything has an inside and an outside. So if it is an outside, it means it's a vessel. So there's a vessel that transports into the inside of, say, a parts of that's below it or outside of it. That's what the outside can do. So normally, the transfer of shefa is coming from the outside of ima into annpin and then into the nuk and so on and so forth like that. Over here we say that actually the nukva with annpin also moves up to a much higher level. Annpin is going to move up to the level of Abba, and nukva is going to move up to the level of ima, let's say like that. And so therefore what happens is that what part of the nukva moves up? The pini up to the kitzonias of the parts of above it, and then the kitzon the panemias of that parts of. Now let me say it again. It moves up to the kitzonias of that parts of, making the kitzonias of that parts of into a panemius. Then because it has a parts of outside of it, or it has an aspect outside of it, and then it moves up. So therefore, that panemius moves up to the kitzonias of the parts of above it, and that's how this climbs. So therefore, what we had originally was that Ima went to the annpin, and she gave her shefa, and the shefa gave over to the nuk. So now we have the nuk at the level of the same shefa that Ima gets, which is from the path of erich annpin. And she's moved up, and she's now on the kitzonius of that shefa. And where does she get her shefa from? Because she just covered over the kitzonius that used to be there. She's now made it into a panemius, and that to think about this one, I've spent a long time trying to understand this. So he says, so let's go on. Panemium b'panemius ima. Besod hey kolos yoyotzes v'hapeh besod hevel, which is the 5 sounds that come out of the mouth, which is the secret of this hevel. Again, these 5 sounds are, I'm going to repeat them again. They are achla, which is the gov goran, chich, which produces the sound gichok. The loshon, the snatong, produces the sound datlenet. Shinayim produces the word, the sound zashratz, and the Safasayim produces the sound bumu. All of those sounds are produced. Those are the 5 sounds. Now let's go back. Hey kolos tefiloseno. Let's go back and let's see it again. So now we're on number Yud Tes in the Tib of Gavana, and the Tib says like this. He says, Ata choyzid abayir yoser inyan the niska the ale. So now I want to explain in more detail, and let me see if I can turn the camera around. There we go. He says, now I want to explain about this in more detail. But inyan the chamesh tefilos shel Yom Kippurim. So these 5 tefilos on Yom Kippur, al yedech chamesh tefilos anachta mamshichan the nukva. That through these 5 tefilos we bring to the nukva chamesh bechila shalachila v'shtia and etc. Panimi. But we're bringing her these 5 things from the panemius because she's moved up to the kitzonius, the position of the kitzonius. I'm telling this again. Her panemius moved up, eventually up to the kitzonius of Ima. that made the chitzonius of Ima into a panemius, and that is the Sheva that she's now receiving. Mipanemius Ima, that's what he said. So let me say number 20. So these 5 different levels of eating and drinking. They're either this, because these sounds, zashrats and like that, these are all different kinds of breath, actually, that are generated from the lungs through the mouth and so on and so forth. V'nirmazim gam kein b'chamesha tefillah she'anachnu mispalim, and they're also referenced by the 5 different tefillos that we pray. Mispalim b'yom kippurim she'hem gam kein b'chinas kolos, which are also the concept of sounds. Now that's very interesting. He says that these 5 sounds, again, called cha, kicha, datlenet, zashrats, and bumaf, those are the sounds produced at 5 different levels in the mouth. Or he says these are 5 different vapors or 5 different breaths. So he says that the philos are the same thing as them. How does that work? I'm not sure. Let's look over here in the number Kaf Aleph. Higam Elohea Bechinas and Iskaras, because these 5 Bechinas we're mentioning here, Haim Sod He Kolas Panemium, they're the secret of the 5 interior lights of Yotzim Ima, they come out from the mouth now, he says, of Ima. And Misham Mekabelas and Malchus Ata He Bechinas Achila Vishtia, and now she's receiving 5 different Bechinos, which are Achila Vishtia, etc. Now let's go over here to number Kaf Aleph. I think that's where we're at. Or did we do that already? We did that one already. Okay, so let's go to number Kaf Aleph here. Okay, here now I'm here. Gam Chamesh Bechinas and Iskaros Shehim Tefilus Haim So Chamesh Kolos Panemium Yotzim Pan de Ima. So they're coming out of the mouth of Ima. But they're Mazer Bechamesh Bechinas Shalachida Vishtia, and those different things that have to do with the mouth, that all remembers to that. That's Achila and Shtia. Now, so now he says that this what? That the 5 voices, the 5 sounds he had said that they refer to the 5 different tefillos that we do on Yom Kippur, but they also refer to 5 different sounds. That seems a little bit more out there to me. So let's look at number Kaf Bet. So now he says, words of the Rav. He says, Gamba Bechinas Chamesh Inuyim Atzman, but now we talk about these Inuyim themselves. They correspond to these 5 voices, the 5 sounds. The Shehatainis Nikbatsum. Now, this is getting in more detail. He says the concept of a fast is called the Tzum. Now, the Tzum, let's just say, is Gematria 136. Okay, so offhand, I don't know what that means. But Tzum, who Begematria Kol. 136, same word. So, Tzum, fasting, and voice go together. How's that? Yehu Mamshek. Hey, kolos so what it's doing, it's streaming down 5 sounds, the 5 sounds of the mouth. That is the mouth, the sounds that come from once again, they come from the throat. Sounds that come from the what's the next part? The palate. Sounds that come from the teeth, the tongue, and finally the lips. All of these places produce sounds as they're coming. This air that's coming from inside, coming outwards of Ima. Chamesh Somos Elo. So it's Al Yedei Chamesh Somos. So there's 5 different fasts. Elo Ma'achila B'Shtiya Tzedach Agufni. Okay, let's look a little bit this more here. So number Kaf Bey says, that if we look at the 5 different things that we're doing, now he's not telling me how this Yechila goes with this sound and so on and so forth, or this prayer. He's not saying that so far. I don't know if he will. Is also a reference to the 5 sounds. Ki ha-tainis romez of the bechinas chamesh inuyim. So the tainis, which really is a reference to the 5 different things we can't do. Nikrit tsum. So he said tsum is the gematria of the word kol. Now this is a little hard. I always have trouble with these. So he says a kol is a concept of tefillah. And tefillah has 5 different types of breaths that produce the sounds. etc. So it's a big by afflicting ourselves in these 5 ways or holding ourselves back. So not the mamshich and the nukva, v'yom kippurim chamesh kolos penimim ve'alyonim bepad de'ima. It brings out 5 interior breaths, sounds. I thought sick with sounds. They come from the interior of Ima because, after all, where does the sound come from? It comes from up from the lungs. There has to be an inspiration from up above. It comes out from the lungs. It goes through the throat, goes through the palate, goes through the teeth, goes through the mouth, through the tongue, and out to the lips. That all of that process there is going from the bottom to the top. Chamesh kol penimim ve'alyonim bepad de'ima, and they're coming from the pad de'ima. Gam yesh remizes that. Well, let me see this here. Let's go up here. Now we're going to finish up. Gam yuva na'inya b'pishka p'shuta. Now let's try to understand the simple meaning of what we're saying here. He says, Ki hinei eilach ha'chamesh kolos shenim shaking l'dacha ba'ata. These 5 voices that are now extending down to her. Hey mipinimius chesed gevuras teferes netzachod de'ima. Let's see, like, is it from the Machagat? 9. Right? That is the body of Ima. Let's say, read again. He says, Yuva na'inya p'shuto. He says, Kihine elo chamesh kolos shenim shachim lo ata, that are now coming to the nukva, which is Rachel, which is in the position now of Bina. Mipinimius chesed, mipinimius, where are they coming from? They're coming from the goof of Ima, from her chesed, gevura, teferes, netz, and chod, yisod, the Ima. Now, how does it correspond to her mouth? I'm not sure. So this itself, he says, what? Is the secret of the fast. He says over there, on the day of the fast, so he says that the muach, all of the tinus, all of the limbs of a person are living off of food, substance, that the muach is sent into them. It comes from, it's all ruchni. Because the afflictions and the fasting of the hey elo, these 5 that we talked about, hey kolos and bezonis ruchniim. So now you have these 5 sounds, these 5 voice sounds. Now understand that there's a lot here that I really don't know and really don't understand, but what I'm looking at is this. Nimshachem alecha hey kolos. Hey kolos represents 22 letters. Now in other places we understand that the concept of a letter is the concept of malchus. A malchus is a kli, so that the light of the Ein Sof flows through the letters. So as we're going through this and we're saying out the letters, these 22 different letters, combinations, which are actually made out of 5 different combinations. So he said, Nimshacham alecha hey kolos, 5 different breath sounds produced by breath, by the breath coming from the lungs, etc. Again. Mazonis ruchni, and then the ruchni, the mazonis that we're getting there is all ruchni. Shehem ahei tefilos min amochim asher behei kitzvos ima mamash. So these are the hey tefilos, which come from the 5 particular kitzvos of Ima, which are chesed, gevura, teferes, netzach, and hod. Kamoshe Yisbar in Yana the command Be'ez Hashem. We'll learn that later on as we get to that. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to go to number 24. I'm going to start reading the Tivah Kavanos and try to fill in some of these ideas, which I think are quite profound. Kam yesh the remesh d'zeh, she'anukva mekabelet chamesh kolos me'ima, that the nukva, she receives 5 different sounds from Ima. Ayidecha chamesh inuyim, and this comes as a result of the 5 afflictions. Mitzad mashin atza etzel adam begashmias, and it's very similar to what happens over to here, a physical man, bisman atinus, when we're fasting. Now let's see what else he has to say. He says, Ki harei mavur l'holon. We're going to learn later on. These 5 sounds, that's 5 sets of sounds that are now coming to the nukva b'yom Kippur. They're coming b'benimius de'ima. The sounds themselves are coming from an extremely high place. Now he's saying that we put these sounds together with the 5 different tefillos. So the lowest tefillah would be corresponding to the gorim, I guess, is where it starts. And then the second tefillah would be corresponding to the chech, and so on and so forth, to the palate. So Mechesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, where did they come from, though? How did they transfer? Did they come from the Chagat, Netzachod Yisod, Nai, of Ima? Geheim bebechidas achida v'chashtia. I think it's supposed to be shtia. V'chashtia hamispashetes b'chabepeh. Let me just make a note on that in case I read it again sometime. So he says, v'chachida v'chashtia hamispashetes b'chabepeh, the ima t'socha b'nimiyusa, that comes from the mouth of ima into l'soch b'miniyusa. So he says, I'm not sure how this works. He says, because normally I would think that when you're producing sounds, they're coming outside, and they're becoming like a makif. And we see that in other places. Here, the words that he says, comes from the mouth, the ima, the sok piminiusa, into the inside of ima. Mispashetis mechabepeh, the ima, the sok piminiusa, shehem achesed gevurah teferes netzachod yisod. So they go into her body. That is the sounds that are produced from the mouth. That's what the Tiv is saying. He says that they're produced from the mouth, and they go into the body of the nukva. The Meshama Kabbalah says, excuse me, and they go into the body of Ima. And then the body of Ima transfers them through her hitzonius, which is now panemius, because she's been covered over by the nukva, and able to receive that. Now, let me just say one more thing. He said like this, and I'm going to repeat it again. The Rav says that the hitzonius of the olomos do not move. But the chitzonius of the olomos can be made panemius by the movement of the panemius up above, but down below to up above. So imagine just a ladder that has 2 parts. It has an outside part and an inside part. The inside part has the ability to be able to move up, but the outside part does not. So let's say it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's say 5 moves to 4. So what's going to happen is that what used to be the outside of 5 is now going to be covered over by the panemius of the used to be outside of number 4, is now going to be covered over by the panemius of number 5, which has now turned itself into a chitzonius. That makes the possibility for the chitzonius, what used to be the chitzonius is now the panemius, to move up on top of the chitzonius of the other parts of above it. This is the secret of the movement of olomos, and you'll see this a lot. Just stated in simple facts, as you say, like here, like Malchus moves to Bina. It's not exactly like that. It's an aspect of Malchus that moves. It is the panemius of Malchus. Little by little, it makes its way up to Ima. Number Kaf Vav. Let's start to finish it out here, and let's finish, and it goes like this, and he says like this, so now she's receiving shefa for the panemios of Ima. Nearest the Ima, the tiniest, the Yom Kippurim. This could be compared to the fast that we do on Yom Kippur. So that brings to the Zohar again, the Parshas Truma. Should be Yom Tainis. Azai call Evarim Nizonim Mimazon Shosholeach Lechem Hamuach. So he says on Yom Kippur, since there's no physical eating, all of the Avarim that are fed from the mazon that comes from the moach. Now, what's the moach? It means panemius. So when a person then eats, the first place we get the food is going to be the liver. As the mazon called the rebarmim, from the liver, it transfers, and I guess this is like the malchus, the lowest level of malchus, and it starts to transfer to all the rest of the places in the body. Of a yom tainis, but what happens? That's the way it is normally. And maybe there's a few words missing there. He says, then you're not getting physical food anymore. You're not going to the liver. So therefore all of this is what we're doing on Yom Kippur. We afflict ourselves. We're bringing her now Shev and Mazon Ruchni. which is the sound, the concept of these five sounds. The five sounds, once again, the letters hold ruchnius. They don't hold physicality, they hold ruchnius. You're coming out of the five sounds, produce 22 letters. These 22 letters hold the ruchnius. And this ruchnius that we're talking about now from these five sounds is going to become the nizonos that's going to feed the body of the nukva, or us, as we're moving up. And it's coming from Hamochim Shebechamesh Kitzvo Shel Iman, particularly coming from the Chesed Gevurah Teferes Netzach and Hod of Ima, Shem Chesed Gevurah Teferes Netzach Hod Shalom. Okay, that's the shir here, and thank you for listening. I know that I did 3 in a row. Maybe nobody will listen to them, but I listened, and I think there's some malachim out there listening, and maybe I made a mistake or two. I'm pushing this idea of the Benemius and Kitzir and Sonius and how worlds move up, because you'll see this language a lot. And the Tiv was dealing with it. I'm not sure exactly what he said, but maybe I'll take a look at it later and, try to comfort myself. This is Baruch Fleischman, Tikkun Elevator, Kolo.